At first, there is nothing strange about the hallway. It is late. The building is quiet. The carpet is ugly, but hotel carpets often are. Identical doors line both walls, and a weak light glows at the far end. You begin walking. Your room should be just around the corner. Then you pass the same potted plant again. You stop. Perhaps the hotel bought several of them. That would be normal. Hotels have committed worse crimes against interior design before. You continue walking. Another corner, another row of doors. Then the plant appears for a third time. Now the doors have no handles. The exit sign points in both directions. The hallway behind you seems longer than the hallway you entered. Nothing has jumped out. Nothing has spoken your name. But the building has stopped behaving like a building. And that may be worse. Because the hallway makes a promise. It is supposed to take you somewhere. A door should open into a room. A staircase should connect one floor to another. An exit sign should lead outside. But what happens when a place keeps the shape of that promise while removing the destination? That is the unease behind liminal spaces, and the nightmare that the internet would eventually call the backrooms. Online, the phrase liminal space usually brings up a familiar collection of images. An empty airport at 3 in the morning. A school hallway during summer break. A shopping mall after closing. A playground lit by one lonely street lamp. These places are built for people, yet the people are missing. Emptiness is part of the effect. But emptiness alone is not enough. An empty beach can feel peaceful. An empty bedroom can feel safe. Even an empty office might be wonderful if you're the person who normally has to attend the meetings. What matters is whether the place still makes sense without its usual activity. A railway platform expects a train. A waiting room expects someone to be waiting. A children's play area expects noise, movement, and children. When those signals disappear, the purpose of the place becomes uncertain. You recognize what it was built for, but you cannot tell why it is empty, or whether it is truly empty at all. Researchers Michael Deal and Carl Lewis tested a related question. What makes a physical place feel uncanny? Their work suggests that ordinary rooms become eerier when the basic arrangement is disturbed. A door is too small. Furniture is the wrong size. Features repeat too often. Objects appear where they do not belong. The room remains recognizable, but only just. This is sometimes described as an uncanny valley for places. We usually hear that phrase in connection with faces or human like machines. Something looks almost human, but a small mistake makes it unsettling. A similar effect can happen with architecture. The space is close enough to normal that we understand it, but wrong enough that we stop trusting it. Repetition makes the distrust worse. In a well designed building, landmarks help us form a mental map. A window, a colored wall, or a change in the flooring tells us where we are. Remove those landmarks and replace them with identical corners, and every choice begins to look like the one before it. Movement continues, but progress becomes uncertain. That does not mean the brain contains a special backrooms alarm. It also does not prove that everyone will fear the same photograph. Some people find these images comforting, some feel nostalgia. Others want to explore them. The response depends on the image, the viewer, and the memories they bring with them. The feeling itself is simple. You recognize the place, you know what it was built for. But something is missing. Maybe it's the people. Maybe the proportions feel slightly wrong. Or maybe the same rooms keep repeating. Nothing openly threatens you, yet little by little the space stops feeling trustworthy. But before the internet filled our screens with empty malls and yellow corridors, the word liminal had a much more specific meaning. The word liminal comes from the Latin word for threshold. In 1909, the ethnographer Arnold van Gennep used the idea while studying rites of passage, ceremonies that mark a change in a person's social position. A child becomes an adult. An outsider becomes a member. Two people become married. Van Gennep described these changes in three broad stages. First, you leave your old position. Then you enter an in-between period. Finally, you return with a new place in the community. The middle stage is the liminal one. You are no longer what you were, but you have not yet become what comes next. Anthropologist Victor Turner took the idea a step further. He argued that when people move from one stage of life to another, the usual rules can briefly loosen. Their rank, status, and everyday roles may no longer apply in quite the same way. So in its original academic sense, liminality was not about empty hallways or eerie lighting. It described the experience of being between one social state and the next. The internet kept the idea of being between places, but changed how it was used. A hotel hallway is physically between rooms. An airport gate is between departure and arrival. A stairwell is neither the floor above nor the floor below. Online culture turns those literal transition areas into a visual mood. Then the meaning expanded again. Images did not always have to show true passageways. Empty schools, vacant restaurants, and quiet suburban streets were also called liminal because they felt suspended between normal uses, or between a remembered past and an uncertain present. The academic term had become an internet aesthetic. That newer meaning is not identical to the anthropological one, but the connection is not completely random either. Both involve uncertainty between defined states. The crucial difference is that a rite of passage is supposed to end. The person crosses the threshold and arrives somewhere new. Liminal horror asks a darker question. What if the crossing never ends? Long before online communities imagined endless office corridors, folklore recorded another kind of failed passage. The familiar road that suddenly refuses to take a traveler home. These traditions do not prove that every culture shares one ancient fear, but they give us useful examples of how people turned disorientation into a story. In a 19th century collection of Welsh folklore, Wirt Sykes described the Gwyllion, frightening female spirits said to haunt lonely roads in the Welsh mountains and lead night travelers astray. People could know the road like the back of their hand and still lose their way after the old woman of the mountain appeared. One account follows a man crossing the Black Mountain at night. He sees an old woman ahead and assumes she can guide him. But the faster he walks, the farther away she seems. Soon he is stumbling into a marsh while she laughs somewhere in the darkness. When he draws a knife, the figure disappears. The account preserves a rule for breaking the encounter. The landscape is dangerous, but the tradition offers the traveler a response, something he can do to restore order. Another recorded belief uses a stranger solution. It involves taking off your coat. In Gower, Wales, travelers could be described as pixie-led. Pixies were said to confuse someone crossing a field at night, causing the traveler to lose the way. The reported countermeasure was to turn a coat inside out. Apparently, supernatural navigation problems sometimes require supernatural wardrobe decisions. Philippine folklore contains its own stories of travelers being misled. In common modern descriptions, the tikbalang is a tall horse-headed being associated with forests and mountain paths. It is said to play tricks on travelers, confuse their direction, and lead them astray. Our source for that specific behavior is general, so we should keep the comparison narrow. Separate from the tikbalang stories is a wider tradition of territorial respect. Some Filipino beliefs treat people as sharing the landscape with unseen beings associated with trees, mounds, and other places. Before passing through or disturbing their territory, a person may say, "Tabi-tabi po," roughly translated as, "Excuse me," as a sign of respect. The traditions are culturally different, and we should keep them that way. We have no evidence that Welsh and Filipino stories share one origin. What they offer is a recurring narrative pattern. The traveler crosses into a place where ordinary navigation no longer works, and the story gives that confusion an unseen intelligence. The path is not merely difficult. Something is making it difficult. The Backrooms began with a place that was not supernatural at all. The famous photograph was taken in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, during the renovation of the upper floor of a former furniture store. Partitions had been removed. Sections of the carpet were being replaced after water damage. The room was ordinary, temporary, and unfinished. The photograph was taken in June 2002 and later appeared on a renovation webpage connected to the building's new tenant, Hobbytown. For years, however, most people sharing the image did not know that history. Stripped of its location and explanation, the room looked less like a renovation and more like a place outside ordinary life. Context usually makes a photograph smaller. It tells us where the walls end and who was holding the camera and what happened next. Without context, the yellow room could be anywhere. It could also be impossibly large. The lack of information gave the internet room to enter, and naturally make the situation much worse. The image circulated online before the Backrooms had a name. An earlier documented appearance occurred in a 4chan thread in 2018. Then, in May 2019, an anonymous user posted it to the site's paranormal board during a request for images that simply felt wrong. Another anonymous user supplied the story. The reply warned that if you were not careful, you could no-clip out of reality and end up in the backrooms. No-clipping is a term from video games. It describes passing through a wall, floor, or boundary that should be solid. The legend treated reality itself as if it contained a map error. On the other side was an enormous maze of empty rooms, yellow walls, damp carpet, and the endless electrical hum of fluorescent lights. The original description offered almost no plot. It gave readers a location, a sensory atmosphere, and the suggestion that something else might be wandering nearby. That restraint mattered. The first version left most of the horror unfinished. It did not explain who built the rooms, why they existed, or how anyone could escape. Readers had to imagine what waited beyond the next corner. The blank areas in the story worked like the blank areas in the photograph. They invited participation. Soon, other people began adding their own answers. Online communities invented levels, creatures, colonies, survival rules, and competing versions of the world. The Backrooms became digital folklore, a story with no single owner controlling every detail, changing as people repeated it, argued about it, and built new branches. In January 2022, the Backrooms changed again. Kane Pixels, known online as Kane Pixels, uploaded a 9-minute video titled The Backrooms Found Footage. He was 16 at the time. Using Blender and visual effects software, he transformed the static photograph into a place a camera could actually enter. The film begins with an ordinary recording accident that becomes impossible. A young filmmaker falls out of the normal world and lands inside the maze. The handheld camera gives the rooms weight. Corners have depth. Footsteps echo. The fluorescent hum is no longer something described in text. We can hear it pressing against the silence. Parsons also understood when not to show us something. For much of the film, the architecture supplies the threat. The camera turns one corner after another. Rooms open into larger rooms. Openings lead to more openings. Even before a creature appears, the viewer understands the immediate problem. There is no reliable map. That is where repetition becomes more than a visual style. It becomes a trap. In his 1919 essay on the uncanny, Sigmund Freud described a simple but unsettling experience: becoming lost, choosing a different route, and somehow returning to the same place again. Nothing supernatural has happened, but with every return the mistake feels less accidental, and the path feels less trustworthy. Freud was not describing the Backrooms. He was not offering a modern scientific explanation for why these spaces frighten us. But his example gives us a useful comparison. The rooms do not have to attack you. They only have to make every choice lead back to where you started. Once that happens, you are no longer navigating the building. The building seems to be deciding where you go. A normal maze is designed to confuse you, but it still has boundaries. Somewhere there's an entrance, an exit, and usually a person selling tickets. The Backrooms removes that reassurance. Its scale is uncertain. Its layout can change. The victim cannot even be sure that an exit exists. This is why the building can feel like the first monster. That is our interpretation. Not a fact about what every creator intended. But the architecture behaves like an antagonist. It isolates the traveler, hides useful landmarks, and turns movement into exhaustion without progress. The place does what the misleading spirit once did to the road. Parsons did not really make one successful short. He expanded it into a web series involving disappearances, experiments, and a fictional research organization trying to map the impossible space. The videos gave one branch of the Backrooms a clearer history without closing every mystery. Then the project made another unlikely jump. 4 years after the first video, the Backrooms reached cinemas. In 2026, the 20-year-old Parsons directed a feature-length adaptation written by Will Sudik and released by A24 and Chernin Entertainment. Its official premise was simple. A strange doorway appears beneath a furniture showroom. We can leave the plot there. This corridor has enough spoilers already. What matters for our story is how Parsons built the space. Before production, he modeled the feature's environments in Blender. Those digital layouts were then handed to an art department and constructed as a physical maze, covering roughly 30,000 square feet. The crew sometimes became lost inside the set, including Parsons himself. The teenager who once built the rooms on a home computer was now directing actors inside a full-sized version of them. Parsons also insisted that the feature remain connected to his online series. The medium had changed, but he did not see the film as a replacement for the internet version. He described the central question in plain language. What is our relationship with the spaces we inhabit? That statement gives us something the earlier visual notes could not. The attention to architecture was not merely imposed by critics. Space was part of the question Parsons wanted the feature to explore. Audiences turned that question into a major commercial event. According to Associated Press reporting, Backrooms opened at number 1 in North America, earning about $81 million domestically and roughly $118 million worldwide during its opening weekend. Most of that opening audience was younger than 35. Those numbers do not prove that every viewer fears liminal spaces, or even that everyone liked the film. They show something narrower but still remarkable. An anonymous image board story became a collaborative legend. A teenager reshaped it into a viral series. Then that version drew a large audience into theaters. The internet myth had become a shared, public event. Media scholar Shira Chess uses the phrase institutional Gothic to describe horror rooted in places and systems of modern institutions. Traditional Gothic stories often give us a decaying castle, an old family estate, or a building haunted by the past. Institutional Gothic moves that unease into offices, hospitals, schools, stores, and government corridors. These buildings are not frightening because they are ancient. They're frightening because they are ordinary. Their lights flatten everything. Their hallways repeat. Their signs reduce people to room numbers, departments, and approved routes. They're built for efficiency, yet they can make the individual inside them feel small and replaceable. The backrooms exaggerate that feeling until the institution becomes infinite. There is no manager to complain to, no reception desk that can explain the layout, and no closing time. Corporate architecture remains after the corporation, workers, and purpose have disappeared. Only the humming system is left, and it seems perfectly capable of continuing without us. The popularity of liminal imagery also grew during the pandemic years when many public places were suddenly emptied of their normal crowds. That timing does not prove the pandemic caused the aesthetic, but empty schools, airports, offices, and shopping centers were no longer imaginary. Millions of people had seen familiar spaces lose their usual purpose almost overnight. The backrooms does not prove that modern people have stopped fearing forests, castles, or creatures in the dark. It shows that an older storytelling pattern can survive a change of scenery. In the folklore we examined, a supernatural being makes the path unreliable. In the backrooms, that role is transferred to the building. What began as an anonymous post in 2019 became a viral video series, and eventually a major theatrical release. That does not prove everyone experiences these spaces in the same way, but it does show how far one image and the feeling people attach to it manage to travel. We build corridors to guide us. Doors are supposed to open somewhere. Rooms are supposed to have a purpose. The backrooms become frightening when those promises fail. When a place built to take you somewhere quietly decides that you are never going to arrive. And somewhere above you, the fluorescent lights keep humming. If you enjoyed this investigation, help support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Don't forget to click the notification bell, and in the comments, let me know if you happen to know a place like that just really creeps you out, okay? Until next time, see you around. Don't die. Bye-bye.